Good evening, everybody. Thanks for joining us again for another edition of Reasonable Doubt, brought to you by the Harris County Criminal Lawyers Association. I'm your host, Jimmy Ardoin, along with my co-host, Julio Vela. What's going on, man?
Excited. I'm very excited to be here. We got a super show.
I know.
Super guests. Big time today.
We are big time today, so I want to introduce our panel before we get right into all of our topics tonight. Sean Buckley joining us again. Sean, it's been about a year since you've been last on this show.
Yeah, Jimmy, I think it has been about a year, and it's good to be back.
Thanks
for having me.
It's good to have you back. And our first-time guest, but long-time friend, Juan Guerra.
That's right. First-time guest, long-time listener.
It's a long overdue invitation to have
I appreciate
you on,
I appreciate you guys inviting me.
Well, no, we're honored to have you on. We got a great show tonight, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to be taking your calls starting about 8:30. We also have Twitter up at HCCLA_TV. We'll be taking your questions and comments. Like I said, the phone lines will be open around 8:30. 713-807-1794 is the number. You can call us with your questions and comments as well. Guys, before we get into some of these crazy topics that we're going to talk about, I got the craziest topic of all. Did you see what happened in Pakistan? In the trial in Pakistan?
With the 4-year-old?
No.
The 3-year-old?
No. Even better.
Oh, the other wild thing
that happened.
Right.
So there was a trial going on in which a Pakistani police officer was called to the stand as an expert in munitions, and they brought a grenade into the freaking courtroom.
I can see where this is going, Jimmy.
And they thought it had been disarmed. He pulls the pin, and boom goes the dynamite all over the place.
I guess he wasn't much of an expert after all.
No.
Hey guys, check this out.
I mean, I saw that today, and I thought, I got to bring that up on the show because I've seen some crazy stuff in a courtroom, but having a grenade go off, the judge got injured, obviously the witness got injured, and a bunch of other people got injured. What's the craziest thing y'all have seen in a courtroom with something like that?
Well,
that's nothing on that level, obviously.
I didn't realize that the Daubert standard was actually Darwinism. But actually, I got attacked by a witness once. Who jumped off the witness stand and attacked me, and the bailiff who tackled him and arrested him became my best fishing buddy and has been for almost 15 years.
So, my craziest thing, Pete Justin and I were trying a non-death capital, and Donna Logan was testifying to rebut one of our witnesses' testimony. And Pete starts cross-examining Donna on how good of friends they are, and they go out to lunch. And Pete Justin's ex-wife was in the crowd, and Pete says, "Well, look, Donna, I don't want you to talk too much about our friendship because my wife's here present." And she gets up and starts waving at the jurors and at the judge, and I'm looking at myself thinking, "Where am I at? What is going on here?" That was pretty hilarious.
I got one. So I help out a few capital attorneys, Anthony also being one of them. And there's one case he's cross-examining the witness, and they pass, and then the district attorney steps up and says, and this is the gun that he used as part of the capital crime. And then the district attorney places the gun literally right in front of the defendant and just leaves it there. And literally we're just like, the gun's in front of the guy who's accused of capital murder. Move the gun! Move the gun! Yeah, and I think the judge caught on to that, and everybody was excused and said, you should probably move that gun away from that guy. Either way, that's the craziest thing I've seen.
Yeah, next time somebody brings a grenade in the courtroom, I'm gonna remind everyone of that story. Man, Juan, I'm glad we have you on this week because we're gonna be talking a lot tonight, ladies and gentlemen, about jail issues. We got a lot to talk about with regard to this MacArthur grant that Harris County just got this week. We'll also talk about the story that broke this week about another inmate dying in the Harris County jail. And of course, Juan, you were on the commission here with Waller County to make improvements to that jail in the wake of Sandra Bland's death. And I guess probably we should start with that because that might help us set the table for a lot of these other discussions to head into. But you guys there was a commission formed. Craig Washington was the head of it. And
he was the chair. Craig Washington was the chair. The committee was formed by Paul Looney's the one that formed it. Craig Washington was our chair. Judge Overstreet was part of the commission. Joanne Music, our president,
Right.
who did a fantastic job. She's the one that actually wrote everything that's in the report, obviously with our input. And we had Randall Killen, who's a civil rights attorney, and myself. And we worked together on this commission. We had full access by the sheriff, which is really unprecedented, unheard of. He gave us access to the jail, all his officers, investigators. So we got to see firsthand jail conditions, how the processing took place. And Paul and I, Joanne as well, we did some ride-alongs with their officers. Paul did some ride-alongs with some of the lead or the investigators. The Sheriff Smith, to his credit, gave us all his policies and procedures up front. It took us some time to get through everything and then start looking into where we thought we could make some recommendations where they could improve. Our focus was what we thought is we went into this, we were hoping, there's such a disconnect as far as trust between the community and police officers. So with that in mind, we went into this process, seeing if we can take a step to kind of bridge that gap and try to get the community to trust officers again.
Was there any pushback? Because this is a commission that's essentially all defense attorneys at this point. I know there's some, like Joanne, who's a former prosecutor on there, but for the most part, everybody now is a defense lawyer.
Yeah, there was actually no pushback. The officers, all the officers that I rode along with were extremely professional, and we went into this, at least I went into this, expecting to find more problems than we did as far as personnel and the policies and some of their procedures that they took place there as far as the policing aspect of it. And to be honest with you, most of those guys, at least everyone that I rode with, was extremely professional, handled their job accordingly, took pride in their work. That was kind of refreshing, but there were still some things that needed to improve. And based on the recommendations, we thought in order to bridge that gap, I think there needs to be some more transparency so the community can start feeling that they can trust these officers. And that was the body cam issue.
Yeah, and we'll get into those recommendations. The commission wasn't formed, though. I realized that Sandra Bland, who, of course, last year, she was pulled over in a very questionable traffic stop situation, ended up being taken into custody, couldn't make a bond, and died within the Waller County Jail. And I understand that that's the impetus for this commission being formed, but y'all were not commissioned to investigate that death.
Correct.
I want to make that clear for everybody,
yeah.
that wasn't the purpose of the commission.
Correct. Our mission was completely separate and apart from the Sandra Bland death investigation. We were commissioned to look into policies and procedures of the Waller County Sheriff's Department and make recommendations to the sheriff where they can improve processing, policing, all aspects of the Waller County Sheriff's Department. So that was our mission. Our mission had, it was based on Sandra Bland's death, but we were not there to investigate what took place, what happened to Sandra Bland there at the Waller County Jail.
What's the atmosphere down there? Is it still ripe with the death of Sandra Bland? Is it as racially tense as some of the media has portrayed it? Is it as sensitive from police officers versus citizens as we feel? Quite frankly, I'm scared to drive through the county because of what I've seen and how the media portrays. What's the feeling down there?
Well, Sandra Bland, it's still a fresh wound. Okay, and you can feel that in the community. At our press conference on Tuesday, if you guys saw it, there was some pushback from the community. So it's still very, very fresh as far as tension between officers and the community. And to be honest with you, based on some of the things that have happened, it's well deserved. The community at this point does not trust police officers, and it's just not in Waller County. I think it's nationwide. It's a nationwide issue. And we understood that. And what we wanted to do is make recommendations that can start in Waller County but hopefully can be an example for other smaller or even larger counties, and we can try to, again, bridge that gap as far as trust between, our citizens and police officers.
And you guys have the recommendation list. It starts with inmate screening for mental health and medical problems, body cameras, kind of an obvious one to me, language and demeanor. It seems to be something that could be corrected in a lot of law enforcement situations.
Let's talk about that. So are they literally saying like, hey, let's get this piece of shit locked up, or hey, let's...
You can say that on the air, but...
Well, pardon me. I think this is what they're saying. Like, is it really like that? Or, I mean,
not all officers. Okay, and what we heard, we heard that language, but it was more at the top, not with the sheriff, but more senior investigators and those types of positions is where that kind of language was heard, and that's bothersome because these are the top, more senior officers, and how they portray themselves kind of trickles down to the rest of the officers, and that's why we felt compelled to address it in our recommendations. And
is that something that you all observed? I mean, or is it something that maybe through word of mouth you saw? But...
It was present, or it was heard by one of our members.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. And it's a small community over there, and one of the recommendations is, get up to. It almost seemed like the title was get with the times about the booking and the central database of information, having it all electronic, being available throughout. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, and this was based on some of the ride-alongs that we did, because Waller is it's got maybe, if I'm not mistaken, about 500 square miles, and there's different sections that they patrol. So if there's a stop or a situation, outside the county, they have to come back and write a report. Well, that takes away time on the streets. So it's just kind of an obvious recommendation, but they didn't have that capability down there to be able to write reports there at the scene instead of having to come back to their office and have to do that paperwork. We thought it was taking away time from the streets, if you will, from the community. And again, that goes back to the more the officers are in the community, the more the community sees them, the more they get to know them, and it kind of starts mending that lack of trust. So that was kind of the objective, or not kind of, the objective for that recommendation.
Yeah, no, I mean, I was going to say, and I'll direct this question to all of you on the panel, but Waller County is not a big county. Unfortunately, the majority of the counties in Texas are not large counties, and I wonder really how long it would take to implement this process in a small county. And I mean, I know, Sean, you used to do a lot of work up in Walker County in Huntsville, and I mean, it's got to be the same thing, same problems they face up there. I mean, you have a huge budget constraint problem.
Yeah, and I think it appears, Juan, that what you're saying is that there's a technology need that hasn't been met, and the technology is available. The question is, how can we implement it? And I know in the case of Walker County, that would be a serious constraint to getting it implemented. It's just the approval and the budget. Often the community, the people who are interested in voting and being involved in local politics, do not share the interest in helping progress like this.
Why is it? And this is just a general, not necessarily specific to this topic, but it seems to me that we have a real problem with innovation, not just in the law as a whole, but specifically in the criminal justice system. I mean, we have all of these brilliant people who are innovating in the tech world and innovating in the business world, and we still seem to be stuck in the Stone Age with, clubs and spears in terms of the criminal justice system.
The people who hold the purse strings are not the ones on the receiving end of the criminal justice apparatus. I think that's the bottom line.
Right. And so what was unique to our situation with Waller County is we had a willing sheriff who wanted to make these changes and would advocate for these changes and the money constraints to the county commissioners and try to get funding for some of these recommendations. They're already working on some of these recommendations as far as funding. So a lot of this is already in the process. The one big obvious one as far as constraints, I mean, they need a new jail. Yeah. I mean, the jail that they have is for lack of a better word, is dilapidated. It's a terrible facility. They seriously need a new jail. Now that's going to take some time. It's in the progress. They have land for it, but the next step is getting money for an architect and getting the money to actually to build it. So that was refreshing in a sense, that we had a sheriff that would say, you know what, if there's a better way to do it, tell me how, and I'll go advocate for it. So that was, again, that was refreshing that we had that type of attitude and that type of support from the man that really kind of exposed himself and said, hey, look, come into my home and, you know, tell me what I can do different to run things better.
Do you think the jail was, I mean, is overcrowding the issue? Is just the age of the jail? Is there just not enough, not up to date? What would you say the issues with that jail were?
It's not up to date, and you know, the sheriff talked about this in our press conference. You know, now the jails that are being built with a more open format, if you will, like our homes now. You know, it's all an open concept where you have see-through rooms. There's light coming in. You see people in most part of the home with an open concept, and that's really the issue with this jail. It's just old. It was built sometime in the 80s, so it needs a new jail with a new concept, which I think that concept would help, you know, the inmates in the sense that, you know, the guards can keep watch over them, which was one of the issues that we had with Sandra Bland. So that open concept, I think, would be helpful for everybody, the jailers and the inmates.
Excluding the cost of the new jail, I mean, was there any estimate as to how much body cameras, counseling, booking changing the book, investing in the technology for the booking process? Was there any kind of estimation of what the other policies and procedures would cost?
Well, no, but we went into this knowing that we had budget constraints. It's a small county, and one of the things that we kind of went back and forth, and this, you know, we met on Saturdays, and you know, on one of our meetings, what we discussed was policies and procedures to operate the body cams. And one of the big issues that we had to deal with as far as storing that data. You know, where do we store it? How much can Waller County provide for storage as far as funds? You know, do you ask them to store it for 24 hours, 72 hours? Or, you know, 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. And, you know, our best guesstimate as far as financially being able to support that would be for them, Waller County, to store that data for just 30 days. And, you know, we looked at DOJ policies regarding body cams, and I was also on the Sylvester Turner's transition team on the Criminal Justice Committee, and we recommended that HPD store that data for at least 90 days because they have the budget for it. Waller County, unfortunately doesn't.
Well, and does an individual who, let's say, arrested in Waller County, do they get to court, get appointed counsel, and have a court date? Is that 30 days enough for a lawyer to go in there and, you know, file some subpoenas or a motion to get stuff done, or is it?
You know, and that was a big part of our discussion because that was my concern. I mean, we know in smaller counties, you know, Harris County is unique in the sense that, hey, you get arrested one day, you're in court, you know, you have a lawyer, but these smaller counties, sometimes it takes 90 days for them to get an indictment and get into court. Right. So that was a concern that we had. So one of the things that we recommended was to have a magistrate available quickly for there to be a bond set and get them out and hopefully get a lawyer hired, and then the lawyer is going to have to understand the policies and procedures that they're limited to 30 days, send in a request to store that evidence longer until the case is, you know, resolved. So we took all those things into consideration, but, you know, in the perfect world, we would ask them to store it for 90 days, 180 days, but, you know, because of the time or the financial constraints that Waller County has, it just wasn't feasible. They would go broke.
Do the recommendations have any real teeth? I mean, obviously, we have a public document that's out there. So if they fail to adhere to at least some of the recommendations and something bad happens, there's no more, whoops, you know, I didn't know about this, should have known. So this report, was it given to the the city council or commissioners there, and what are the next steps?
Okay, so what we as far as before, I'm going to answer you, but there's something that I want to talk about that I found just incredible. Okay, officers, when they are hired, they get screened psychologically or evaluated psychologically when they're hired. After that, nothing. That was incredible to me. So I was a big advocate for the every 3 years having a mental screening, because we're not the same person that we are at 20, 30, 40, and especially these officers.
Absolutely.
They're going through some traumatic things, seeing traumatic things every day.
Absolutely.
And I thought that was extraordinary that they only get screened once. So our recommendation was every 3 years mental evaluations, and every 18 months have some kind of counseling. And I thought that was really, really important for what we were doing. And the sheriff, to his benefit, he is already implementing some of those things. Everything that we've recommended, the sheriff's already trying to implement some of these recommendations, with the exception of, well, obviously the jail. He just needs to get to the money to do it, taxpayers to pay for it. And also we recommended that his duties as far as policing and jailing be separated, and have the sheriff, just handle the policing aspect of being a sheriff and not handle the actual jail. That's going to take legislative action. So what we did is I personally handed this recommendation, our recommendations, to 2 state reps, and asked them, I said, look, we need help on this, okay? It's the right thing to do. And everybody from Senator Whitmire, everybody that is an elected official there in Waller County is going to get a copy. Everybody that'll listen, that'll take a copy, is going to get a copy, as far as elected officials.
And we had another inmate die at the Harris County Jail. And I wonder, I mean, Patrick Brown, it was the gentleman who, he's booked in on April 3rd on a charge of stealing a guitar. And
Not a death sentence, Jimmy.
no.
Unless you're in Harris County.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean,
Or, unless you steal Slash's guitar from the Guns N' Roses concert.
or Pakistan.
But it's not a death sentence, and we kind of joke about it a little bit. But I mean, it's a misdemeanor theft charge. The guy was denied a PR bond, much like Sandra Bland. I mean, she didn't get a PR bond in Waller County. 2 days later, this guy is beaten to death in the Harris County Jail, and this is like the 75th death I think I saw within the last 2 or 3 years or something like that at the Harris County Jail. I mean,
There have been a number of them, and many of them are natural causes, but you have to wonder, really, is it a natural cause? Are you pushing someone over the edge when their biology says, we just can't take anymore, and you're giving them more than they can take, and you're pushing them over the edge? Is that really a natural cause? But for being in the Harris County Jail, would that person have passed away in 2012, or would it have been 2020? I'd go on with more adjectives about the Harris County Jail, but we're on the air, frankly.
well, I didn't stop Julio earlier.
Well, and a natural death doesn't mean you take away meds and they die, right? That's not a natural death. These kind of things are, there's some of the same recommendations that you're giving to Waller County about.
But I get back to the point that just, look, okay, yes, you're charged with a crime, and maybe a lot of these people, they will eventually plead guilty, and the majority of them probably, as we all know, probably are good for what they did, okay?
Sure.
That's the reality. But the majority of these crimes, or all of these crimes, are not death sentences. Someone doesn't deserve to die because they can't make a bond.
One of the biggest problems we have now in the Harris County Jail is we have a community of jailers, the people who keep and supervise and manage the inmates, who are hired before they're trained. And they're paid $18 an hour. They're often forced to work overtime, double shifts. And they are hired, put to work, and then they can receive their training within the next year online.
Yeah.
They don't have to go to police academy where you climb up the ropes and where you sit in class learning proper procedure. The kind of people who are amenable to the kind of the improvements that Mr. Guerra has been working on down in Waller County, these are not the professional type people who will respond to that These are people who start their job
Mood lighting here.
Instead of working at McDonald's.
Yeah, well, and the other thing, so this all kind of happens in the same week that they announced the MacArthur grant of $2 million, which
I could blow through $2 million in a week, making the Harris County Jail a livable environment.
I mean, you could probably blow through $2 million in a day trying to do that. I mean, it's not even, and the goal, the stated goal was to reduce the jail population 21% in 3 years, and that's 1,800 people in 3 years. I mean, couldn't they figure out a way to reduce it by 1,800 people just by giving PR bonds within 3 days? Forget 3 years.
Exactly. PR bonds. I think you can reduce that
Right.
In a week or two by giving PR bonds.
And you don't need a $2 million grant to do that.
It would be embarrassing to me if I were a county official to come out in public and say that the reason we're about to make improvements in this jail is because someone else donated money to us.
Yeah, that's it.
Frankly, it's pathetic, and it ought to be an embarrassment. But for
It
some
is an
reason,
embarrassment.
instead of being an embarrassment, people are on the front page bragging about it.
And you know what's going to be embarrassment when this $2 million just pissed away, because in a year there's not going to be a reduction if we don't have a change in the district attorney's office and how they accept charges and the way the police are policing individuals. This $2 million is going to go to pot.
Well, and is this $2 million supposed to last for 3 years? I mean, I don't get
Well,
it.
if you amortize that over 36 months,
I mean, what's it going to do? You know, if the district attorney just stopped accepting dumb charges on people, we might be able to see a reduction in population.
But look at this too. I mean, they've had the DOJ come in multiple times, and
they're
point
still
out-
monitoring it.
and they're still monitoring it, and this happens. But Juan, I mean, you guys got the commission to come in and make these recommendations. I'm not sure that a commission, if one was put together, that it would do anything in Harris County.
It is a machine. It's this is policy and economics at work. How much can we get away with without some event happening that tries to bankrupt us? And that's what it is. It just hasn't bankrupted them yet, and they decided that it is easier for them to violate people's rights than it is for them to spend money. They're spending money on the back end and not the front end, and they found that that's more economical.
Do we know where this $2 million, who's in charge of it?
It's from a national endowment.
But who's in charge of distributing this money and monitoring this money?
Well, my question is more towards, what their objective is. It's a noble thought, and it's a very general, wide statement. But how do you get there? Tell me the logistics.
Right.
There's been no specifics on how this is going to be accomplished with this meager, I say meager when it comes to our judicial system,
right,
or the Harris County machine, if you will, this $2 million. How specifically do they intend to deal with overcrowding at the Harris County Jail with $2 million?
Well, here's some of the things they say. So entail greater use of pretrial interventions for first-time felony drug and misdemeanor retail theft offenders. They didn't need a grant for that.
Right.
Okay.
Right. In fact, that's cost them less to do that.
Yeah, that actually helps save them money.
Right.
If they implement that. It says also the county will create a reintegration impact court. What the heck does that mean?
It ought to be every court. Every court ought to be concerned with how people who run afoul of the law can get back into things. That's what the probationary and deferred adjudication system is doing.
Yeah, and it says, okay, so I guess they explain the reintegration court as being involving nonviolent offenders charged with possession of less than 1 gram, prostitution, theft, third offender, and these are people that we can quickly get into diversion programs and treatment. I mean,
so basically, we're investing this grant money in something that is the district attorney's job to begin with, which is to use prosecutorial discretion in how and when to prosecute people.
And going back on what Sean said, they're addressing the problem on the back end and not in the front end, because all these things that they're talking about are individuals that they're trying to get out of the jail. Well, if they didn't lock them up in the first place, we wouldn't have this flood of individuals that they're trying to just kick out and make room. They got to address it at the front end. I still see people getting arrested for these pretrial interventions for theft, these kind of things. For prostitution, while they're doing a good job and fighting that, you have these ladies that, I mean, would have taken a time served on the first setting if they could, but now they're being held 2 to 3 weeks while they do their investigation, and they're doing their safe court thing and doing all kinds of things. They're not addressing the problem at the front end on people coming in the jail. And so all their programs are doing is trying to get people out as quick as they can, but they're not doing anything stopping the flood in.
Yep. A couple of recommendations that we made to Mayor Turner as far as trying to deal with overcrowding at the at the Houston Police Department jail. Cite and release was a big thing that we discussed. Cite and release was one of them on, minor marijuana cases, minor drug cases, traffic violations, and it kind of led into an immigration issue because, as Julio, some of our undocumented people are being pulled over for a traffic violation, arrested, and then held in the Houston Police Department jail, and then sent over to immigration.
Right.
So when we asked Mayor Turner to do, instead of arresting these people, cite them, release them, give them a court date.
Right.
Okay. And the other thing that we worked on, and I thought it was intriguing, and everybody that worked on it did a wonderful job, was sobering centers. When you arrest or come into contact with somebody on the street that is intoxicated, drugs or alcohol, whatever it is, send them to a sobriety center. There's one downtown, and the mayor's looking to create some around the outskirts outside of the downtown, if you will. I thought that was an incredible idea to offer these people, instead of taking them to jail, take them to a sobering center where they can deal with their addiction, get treatment for it, and hopefully get out of there in a better state of mind. I thought that was an incredible suggestion. And we have a facility downtown that has 200 beds that's being underutilized.
Of the hundreds of misdemeanors that I do a year, I've never even heard of that. I mean, why isn't that just being? Those are things that address on the front end.
Exactly. That's where the $2 million need to be spent on programs like that. Sobering centers, cite and release programs. That's where you deal with the overcrowding at the front end with police officers and how you train them. Where do you send them? Give them different options besides take this guy to jail for, being intoxicated, having residue, a bag of residue cocaine. Send him to a sobering center.
Recently, we had a case where they tested the guy's shirt, and the test came positive with cocaine. They swabbed his shirt, and so now we're fighting a year in court over a swab of the guy's shirt that tested positive for cocaine.
Use the same defense I used recently, the borrowed clothes defense.
Yeah, what my shirt?
Yeah, exactly.
But I got a not guilty. Borrowed pants.
Why do we have to do that? And it's the culture of arrest first, we'll answer questions later. Mm-hmm. You're like, yes, we'll accept the charge, we'll deal with it in court. That shouldn't be the case. We should say, okay, let's investigate first. Let's see the truth and veracity of people who are making some of these statements or these officers who are arresting individuals. And if it sticks, then we put out the warrant. That's how it should be.
We're going to open up our phone lines now. We've crossed the 8:30 mark, so 713-807-1794. If you got questions for Sean, Buckley, Juan, Guerra, myself, and Julio, give us a call right here on the air. Guys, I mean, haven't we gotten away from what the term diversion means ultimately? Because diversion, you shouldn't even be in the court system in the first place. And now we're putting everything under the court's thumb.
There's a criminal justice industrial complex. And as you know, Jimmy, with any organization or governmental entity, it wants to feed itself. It does not want to shrink. It only wants to grow. And once it gets its teeth in somebody or some angle or some economic unit, it only wants to grow.
It's almost like predatory lending in a
Sure.
way. I mean,
It's worse.
They've got a captured audience. I mean, no pun intended. But I mean, they've got people who are in the system, and they can keep their thumb on you and keep you perpetually in the system with
like
all these little violations you could have.
It's like a predatory lender who operates under color of law.
Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly what it is.
I think I read about something in a book called 1984.
Yeah.
It sounded a lot
I think
similar
Mr.
to that.
Orwell got it right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Juan, how was the mayor? How was that process? What was your experience like, and was he receptive to some of the things, recommendations that you?
You know, we had a very diverse group of people. Professor Guerra Thompson was a chair with Cedric Muhammad was a co-chair. But the mayor, once we made our recommendations, he was very, very receptive. I was arguing the immigration issue on site and release, that it also overcrowded. I mean, we're essentially having people being deported for committing a traffic violation. And so I was arguing my point, and the mayor says, Juan, I got it. You've already convinced me. I got it. Okay. So he was very receptive to some of the recommendations that we made. You know, we also dealt with body cams with him. They're already on their way. But the body cam issue that we dealt with the city, they had a general order as far as policies and procedures, which needed a lot of help. So we instead of we recommended that they use the DOJ policies and procedures and kind of even beef those up a little bit. Vivian King was the chair of our committee. There was a couple of different co-chairs, but Vivian did a great job with that. But we wanted to strengthen up the policies and procedures as far as retention periods, who is responsible for maintaining them, and what kind of data should be available to us, defense attorneys, when we ask for it. You know, when to actually download the information, not 72 hours later. You download it when you finish your shift, you know. But I guess in short, the mayor was very receptive to our recommendations. And again, sobering centers, site and release are things that up front deal with jail overcrowding.
Well, you know, I mean, it's a good thing what you guys did as the commission. I hope that your report can be used as a template to help other jails to figure this out, because it's just an ongoing problem. I mean, it's really embarrassing. It really truly is embarrassing. I want to switch gears because we could go on for this for days, but I want to get to the fight, because I know, Sean, you have some very strong opinions on this. But I want to get to the latest fight with the DOJ and Apple. And, you know, we kind of touched on it last week, Julio, about how the DOJ had backed off from California. A lot's happened since then. You know, Apple, they withdrew their challenge in California, and then all of a sudden, they hacked into the shooter's phone. And now they won't tell anybody how they hacked in. And James Comey, the director, comes out today and says, I'm not really sure how they hacked in. Not sure how they did it, but they hired some private firm to do it. And now they've taken this fight to New York. And I'm curious, Sean, because, you know, you and I have, and Juan, you too, the three of us have done a lot of federal work here. And we've seen the government strategically do things in cases where they'll, you know, you'll fight them on a motion to suppress. They'll appeal it if you win it, but then they might dismiss their appeal. And it's interesting to me here because, you know, I'm not sure what the end game here is with the DOJ, because I question, some people say that they're trying to pick a more favorable venue in New York. I'm not sure that New York is necessarily a more favorable venue than California. It seems to me, why wouldn't you pick something that's in the Fifth Circuit? You know? I mean,
send it down to the 5th or the 11th.
Right, exactly.
Well, you know, the easiest solution for the DOJ is to spend $28.50 on a FedEx package, FedEx the phone from New York to California, where apparently the FBI has figured out how to do this.
Do it, yeah.
But what the feds want to do is they want to force a company to do work, to spend its own capital providing a solution for the government, which at a fundamental level, I think, violates the takings clause. It really kind of reeks of the things that brought about the Third Amendment, which is that you can't quarter soldiers in people's houses in peacetime. You can't take things from people if you're the government without some absolute justification for doing so. And if you do that, you have to compensate them. The government's position seems to be, generally speaking, that because you've produced this device and you've made it available, that you have to let us into it.
Under the guise of you need to be a good corporate citizen.
Well, and there's this, they've cited this law from the late 1700s called the All Writs Act. And the All Writs Act basically was a regurgitation of a lot of things from the Old English Code, which is that the government can file a writ to do anything it wants to do. The difference is, and the thing that I think the DOJ has missed here, which is glaring, is that the All Writs Act is tempered by the Constitution.
Right.
And so the constitutional provisions of the Fifth Amendment, the Fourth Amendment, the Third Amendment, and all the other amendments that may come to bear on this limit the seeming overbearing pathway that's forged by the All Writs Act, which to me is just it's absurd.
Yeah, I mean, what? And the interesting thing, I don't know if you guys saw this, but I talked about it a little bit before we went on the air. But Microsoft today announced that they filed a lawsuit up in Seattle, in federal court in Seattle, and they're suing the DOJ to prevent the government from forcing them to turn over the data that they collect and then have to turn over under this national security letter. So basically, you know, the FBI or NSA sends a letter to them saying, you need to produce all your customers' web browsing history, or all your customers' texting history, or all your customers' email history. And oh, by the way, this letter is a gag order, which means you can't say anything to anybody. So they can't report this to their customers. They can't tell them what's going on because the FBI and NSA and everybody else doesn't want them to tip off what's going on. But it's really put companies like Microsoft in a bind.
You know, when I leave here tonight, Jimmy, I think I'm going to go buy an Apple computer and some Microsoft software, because normally the U.S. government picks on people who can't fight back. That's
true.
what they do, and that's why they get away with it, and that's why they think they're so smart and so powerful, is because they pick on people who can't fight back. And I am pleased that they're finally picking on someone who can outspend them, frankly, and out-lawyer them.
Yeah, well, and that's the interesting thing here is that Microsoft has really picked the fight. I mean, now granted, I mean, this is the company that the DOJ sued over antitrust issues, so there's no love between Microsoft and the federal government at this point. So I do find it interesting that they are also picking up the fight here and actively getting on the affirmative to go on it.
There is a brave new world, which isn't much that brave, frankly, that awaits us if people like this don't take up the fight. Because, you know, and I'm really opposed to the kind of slippery slope logic that people tend to engage in with this or that. But really there is, I think, a concern that if the government gets its claws in technology companies and says you have to do what we say, that anytime we do anything on any device with any software, it becomes the government's property.
Well, and this goes back to kind of my earlier statement and observation that the criminal justice system, we're still stuck with clubs and spears and like we're in the Stone Age. I mean, you recall this opinion a couple years ago from the Fifth Circuit that basically said, you know what, you really don't have a right to privacy in your cell phone because you can choose not to participate in a technology society.
You can choose not to breathe.
Yeah, you can choose not to do a lot of things.
Choose not to eat. I mean, it's absurd.
But you can't function in today's world without a phone. And I don't see how the government can tell these companies, you know, in order to be a good corporate citizen, you just got to hand over all your hard-earned R&D and everything that you've spent billions of dollars on to develop security.
The Fifth Circuit or anybody would have never said this back in 1975 when we were toddlers picking up a rotary phone.
Right.
And there really, frankly, shouldn't be any difference.
There shouldn't be. I mean, there shouldn't be any distinction between the rotary phone, the dial pad phone, this phone. I'm just amazed that we've gotten to the point where the government thinks under the guise of, you know, protecting us from terrorism, that they can just go in and blanket take all of our emails and scrape our data. I mean, that's what's amazing to me is this whole data scrape that's going on that we don't even know about. I mean, because companies are getting gag orders and they can't tell us as the customer, as the paying customer, like, oh, by the way, your texts and your emails were scraped up in a criminal investigation. Like that blows my mind that there's stuff going on out there that people are scraping our data The government's sending out these gag orders, and there's nothing we can do about it. I'm just thankful Microsoft is.
In a terrorist event, the initial blast is catastrophic, of course, and devastating. But then the mushroom that comes after it, that the government does, is perhaps worse.
What are they going to gain? Okay, the terrorist in San Bernardino, he's dead. What are they going to gain out of his phone?
You know, and if anybody had half a brain who was involved in that thing, they wouldn't leave anything behind anyway. It's just, I mean.
Or they're going to encrypt it to a point where, you know, you hit a button and it self-destructs.
Or
kind
they'll
of James Bond type thing.
Or they'll leave a false lead.
Yeah, they lead. Yeah, exactly.
It's the same, and it goes from the top to the bottom. You know, here in the local courts, we're seeing gag orders for Brady material. You know, and things that, just like the customer who doesn't know their phone's being hijacked and all their browsing materials being taken without their knowledge, the same thing's happening here. You have the government saying, we know bad things about a police officer that might exonerate your client, but you can't tell anybody about it, and you got to keep it secret. And it's just that same culture.
Let's drop in a phone call here that we got coming in. Hello, welcome to Reasonable Doubt. Thanks for the call.
Yeah, I often tell people that the purpose of government is to exist, and they'll do whatever they have to exist. You look at Syria or Egypt and those kind of things, that they arrest their people. That can happen here, too.
It absolutely can. Thanks for the call.
You know, in caller, it's an organism, and once an organism starts to eat, it wants more to eat.
Yeah.
It wants to grow.
It truly does. I mean, and back to your point, Julio, that was one of the most absurd things that I read. And I haven't experienced it personally, but when I read some of the emails coming out about, you know, the gag orders on exculpatory material that's produced, and that we as lawyers aren't allowed to share it with one another, that really, truly offended me. It really did.
Well, okay, and
but we're supposed to just inherently rely on the government to benevolently tell us everything that's wrong with their case and their witnesses?
Never seen that work out real well before, Jimmy.
No.
This is not my case, and I must have heard it in my sleep, so I cannot authenticate anything other than, for example, an assault case against a peace officer, where this particular officer, in this case, somewhere in the state of Texas, has been accused or is under investigation for excessive use of force and a death of a citizen gagged. Oh, can't tell anybody else. You can't tell anybody about it.
That's admissible evidence in a self-defense.
I agree.
Case.
No doubt.
Gagged. Not my case. I'm not divulging anything else. But it's these types of scenarios. And I'd imagine that this officer, I mean, he might have 10, 15, 20 other people that he's arrested that have the same kind of thing. Turns out this officer is just one big bully who's been involved and been written up before.
Well, to piggyback off of you, Julio, I just tried a case that homicide detective Clapton was involved in the investigation, and I didn't receive a Brady notice on that case. I am about to try a murder case at the end of this month that he is the lead investigator. I still have not got a Brady notice on that. That's an interesting scenario or issue how the DA's office is going to deal with Detective Clapton, who, as we all know, has been fired because of his dealings with the mistress of Go Forth.
Right. Yeah. But even what's even more crazy is just this whole cloud of secrecy that the government and wants put over everything. I mean, they don't want us to share information. We jokingly said we're relying on the benevolence of the prosecutors to tell us. But seriously, guys, when was the last time, other than if a witness died, that a prosecutor came out and told you about the problems with their witnesses and just volunteered, like, oh yeah, by the way, this guy's got this, and this. I mean, you're kind of expected to go out and do the research. They're not going to volunteer this stuff, and if it's not easily accessible and not easy to find, you may never find it.
I usually hear about that kind of stuff when I'm in trial.
Right in the middle of trial.
Oh, by the way.
Yeah.
And
by the way, we have a jailhouse snitch who's going to come and testify on your client.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, he's rebuttal with rebuttal.
We didn't think he was relevant until now.
But, and I think and there are some, and I've seen, unfortunately, these younger prosecutors who come up and take a stand for what's right. They don't make it in the office. They get let go. They get fired. Or their sense of justice is just so strong that they just have to leave on their own. And it's going to take a cultural change. Not all of them are bad. Not all of them.
No.
And there's a lot that are coming up and doing the right thing.
Well, there's a lot who will say, look, here's my file. Here's what I got. Come look at everything. I'm going to show you, you can have anything you want, carte blanche. You want copies, I'll make the copies for you. I'll give you everything. And then you have the ones that, are few and far between. It's not a pandemic. And, a lot of people will sit here and say, oh, you guys are just bashing prosecutors. No. And, the problem is it's like with the defense bar. There are some bad defense lawyers out there, who do shady things. I mean, I saw one article where a defense lawyer was trying to forge a judge's name onto an order one time. Not here in Texas, but like in up in Chicago.
I remember one here in Texas.
Yeah, but I mean, it's just like
forging a dismissal.
Yeah,
that?
That was about a decade ago.
Are you serious?
It resulted in a disbarment.
It sure did.
I mean, so look, there are some really bad apples on both sides of the bar. There's no doubt about it. But I think the issue we have is, we're trying to all do the right thing. And I think it gives prosecutors a bad name for those who don't do the right thing on their side, just as it gives us on the defense side a bad name when defense lawyers don't play by the rules and do what they're supposed to do.
You know what that $2 million would be good for is to get a few good people elected on the bench. I mean, I'll keep that to myself. That's all.
What are you suggesting?
That's all I'm saying.
I'm not sure what exactly you're suggesting there. But I wanted to also cover, since I have you guys here, and I know all of us on this panel, we try a bunch of cases. And there was on social media this week, I saw this resharing of this article that had been floating around since about 2012. And it was a New York Times editorial piece and an opinion piece about how we can crash the criminal justice system. And I saw it I don't even know how many times people just kept sharing again. I'm like, oh my God, this article's been out for 3 years now. And basically the crux of the article was that if we just set every case for trial, we'll implode the system, and the system will implode in upon itself.
It's easy for academics, Jimmy, to say that.
Exactly.
The guys who are sitting in jail waiting to get out, or the people who are staring down life range sentences. If you're the one guy who stands up and says, "Okay, I'm gonna participate and crash the system," but everybody else steps back, and you kiss your life goodbye.
Yeah, it's like the guy holding the active grenade in the courtroom.
I mean, this is like something that they must have written up in creative writing at NYU, but it's just not going to work.
And I thought of even a more conundrum for lawyers, and that is, how could we as lawyers sit there and advise our clients to go to trial in every case?
My absolute duty to a client is to advise them through the path that we believe leads them to the best result.
Right.
And to be honest with giving them alternatives so they can make their decision. The minute that we take a propaganda view or a rhetorical view toward the criminal justice system as a whole, then we have a conflict of interest to our client.
I mean, it's a nice rah-rah piece.
Sure.
But it's just in no way viable.
Yeah, I think at the end it says that it's not really viable. That if so, there's going to have to be some people that, I guess, fall on the sword, if you will.
Yeah.
To bust the system, and it's just not going to happen. But I often have to say cases for trial because there's immigration consequences, and once our judges realize that this case is being set for trial because there's immigration consequences, they're not very happy.
No.
Well, but you run into all sorts of issues. I mean, we've seen cases where you just end up in a situation where the state's in a position because of the nature of the offense or the publicity that the case has got. Their hands are kind of tied, and same in a federal case. I mean, their hands are kind of tied sometimes by the sentencing guidelines, by the court that they're in, or the fact that your client can't cooperate and offer any information to get a better deal. Mm-hmm. Your hands are kind of tied. I mean, in that situation, you're forced to go to trial, not because it's necessarily the thing that you or your client want to do, but there's a lot of other factors in there. I mean, I had a case one time in Galveston County, sexual assault case, that they offered 20. Mm-hmm. You know, well, that was the max.
Right.
Why would I take what you're giving me?
Okay, so that's the max.
You know, and frequently I find that my client's interests and the interests of justice are not in common.
Yeah.
And that may be for a variety of reasons. The most obvious one being that, you know, that the proof is there and we're not going to plead to it. But there are a variety of reasons why that might be true. And so if you look as a practitioner, as a lawyer, I am going to pledge my allegiance to the interest of justice. That may well, in many cases, run contrary to your client's interest.
Well, and just because you have the right to do something doesn't mean you should exercise that right.
But
We all know that. We've learned that many times.
there was a professor over at Thurgood Marshall that said, be careful when you ask for your civil rights because you may get them.
That is true. I mean, I keep reading this article. It's funny to me that people keep sharing this because, you know, it's an old article, and as you said, Juan, it's just they even admit at the end this is not a viable plan. So I'm wondering why this thing keeps floating around out there. It's it just amazes me that it keeps having a life of its own.
It might be just the culture. I think maybe people are starting to wake up about the system. Maybe they've seen one too many cop shootings. Maybe they've seen one too many exonerees. I don't know. But we talked about this on our show maybe 6 months ago when I was champion. Every marijuana case, set it for trial. But then we went back to the same old scenario. You know what? What justice is and the interests of your client in that moment may very well be head-on contrary to each other.
Yeah.
And it is what it is. You know, here's another thing for your $2 million. Put up everybody's PR bond for a particular type of case. And,
there you go, Sean. Yeah, you had some interesting thoughts before the show on the administrative cost of the bond issues.
Sure. I mean, you know, the bond issue in and of itself, and some of my best friends are bondsmen. So I feel like a little bit of a turncoat here, but I'm going to tell it the way that I see it, which is that the bonding system in Harris County creates such a high administrative cost that if you started granting more PR bonds in a sensible way, you would offset that to the amount that you could have substantial savings.
Yeah, you could. And on that note, that's all the time we got this week, ladies and gentlemen. It's been a great show. Sean Buckley, Juan Guerra, we appreciate you joining us this week.
Thank you, Jimmy.
Thanks for having us.
You guys have really, made this a lot of fun tonight.
That's what we're here for.
Gotta have you back on. It's been, we waited too long to get you on, so now we gotta get you back soon. And Sean, I apologize. It was over a year between your
I'm happy
visits.
to be back. Thank you.
Well, we're gonna get you on again. Julio, you ready for the weekend?
Go Stros.
There you go. That's all you got?
That's all I got.
All right. Good night, ladies and gentlemen. We will see you next week. Please check us out on the web at hcclatv.com. Good night.